In our country, Human Development Index, India stands 127th number in the world. 127th number, can you imagine? When we are talking about the 21st century, it's India's century, and this is the reality. We are not providing the proper service to the humankind.
The biggest election in human history is taking place in India right now.
There are two key people fighting this out, Rahul Gandhi from the Congress Party and Narendra Modi from the BJP.
Okay, great. So let's deal with Gandhi first. This guy is the total political package. He's got good looks. He's from a family with 3 former prime ministers. You'd think he'd have this thing completely locked up by now, but
there's a growing wave of support behind Narendra Modi, a hard-man politician who's worked his way up from the bottom. As a boy, he sold tea on a railway station.
Modi sold tea in a railway station, and now he's the most popular man in the country.
We are talking about infant mortality rate, but have you heard about the solution for that? Gujarat gave a solution. My target is that I want to save the mothers. I want to save the child. I took initiative, and the first time in the history of India, that public-private partnership for healthcare sector. For 6 months, my whole government bureaucratic system, in writing, they opposed my scheme. They said it is not possible. Chief Minister, you don't have experience. Now I want to tell you the miracle. I decided within 1,000 days I want to do this scheme implemented. I took the initiative. I went to the cooperative sector. I asked them to give me 10 crore rupees. The cooperative people, they were connected with the BJP. They gave me the 10 crore rupees. And I implemented this scheme in 45 villages in the first round. And the results, it was a miracle.
My take on this would be to think of the Modi phenomenon as the result of some structural needs of India. For several years prior to the election of Mr. Modi, if you look at the Indian economy, you'd find a sense of stagnation. And if you look at the international profile of India, you'd find it steadily declining and a sense of paralysis characterizing the entire government. This lack of cohesion and paralysis is what brings into action the concentrated, concretized wish of hundreds of millions of Indians. One calls it a kind of aspirational electorate. An electorate which wanted India to have India's legitimate place in the international arena. So the Modi phenomenon is a direct response to this form of aspiration.
I can feel the news saying, well, look, that's all well and good, but where's the scandal here? Well, don't worry. Don't worry. Because Modi has got you covered.
Many believe that he played a role in the riots between Hindus and Muslims, which killed thousands back in 2002.
An explosion of communal violence in his home state on Mr. Modi's watch still casts a shadow. At least 1,000 people died, most of them Muslim.
Is that enough of a scandal for you?
Everybody's very hopeful about Mr. Modi and about...
Not everybody. The Muslims in India are not hopeful. No, seriously, I just came back from India, and Muslims they're terrified. They think that Modi and his party want to drive him into the ocean.
I gave a reply that my election speeches are available with the Election Commission. My statements are available in the newspapers. If you will find out a single statement that you can brand as a communal, I will declare myself defeated. No one dare to come forward. No one dare to come forward.
From my point of view, I'm not an Indian. I have no right to say, but I am a security analyst. And India has real issues. Its Muslim population, by its own government's assessment, is one of the most deprived, unrepresented population in both state and federal governments. They're least likely to be educated. In many ways, it's a community that has been left behind.
What I've tried to do is to show how people have sort of universal comparable behavior all over the world. If politics in that sense is universal, why are countries so different? Why is there such desperate disorder often in Africa? Or for that matter, why does India manage to sustain democratic politics, election after election after election? So, if politics is universal, why are countries different?
What do you think about Indian democracy, the largest democracy in the world? It's completely different from the Chinese system.
Yeah, I think from the Chinese perspective, we believe that kind of political system it decides to choose is dependent on its own its history, the development or evolvement of its nation. So it's very difficult to compare which one is good. Only the country, its own people, have a say. What I want to say is that the current system in China, I think is good for China because, people benefit from this system. I mean, for example, my generation, is when we were young, we have a very difficult time. That means as a child, sometimes we still can't have enough food. But after so many years, my child now, they enjoy a very different life from my generation. That's what I want to mean.
Why do you think that democracy has worked in India and has not worked in so many other places like China and Russia?
First and foremost, why does a political system work? any kind of political system. It works because people who matter out there in society or economy also become stakeholders in the politics. India did manage to empower India's people in terms of turning rebels into stakeholders and producing, through entitlement, enfranchisement, and empowerment, a body of citizens who know what they want and who have a means through elections to take part in the politics of the country. And every election is an exercise of this transformation of individuals into citizens, citizens into participants.
But when you look at India, India chose their democratic system because they have their own relations with the British, and they have their own independent movement. They have chosen their own system. And now whether they benefit from it or not, I think they benefit, of course. They have more advantages in dealing with the West, because in terms of the value system, they feel more easier, than us to interact with the West.
And what would you say has been the relationship between Australia and India?
Most of our history as independent countries, the relationship hasn't been terribly close. They never really engaged significantly, either in economic or security or political terms. During the Cold War, both Australia and India perceived each other as being on other sides of the strategic divide. India saw Australia as being a very close ally of the United States. Similarly, Australia saw India and its relationship with the Soviet Union as not being a partner that it wanted to engage with. And it's really only over the last 10 or 15 years that Australia's strategic gaze has looked also westwards. Probably the biggest factor at the moment, at least in strategic terms, is China. Both India and Australia see China's rising power in Asia and are concerned to ensure that as China rises as a power, it does so within the bounds of international law and the international order. I think the Modi government is still calibrating their approach towards China. As many countries in Asia face the same issue, they have a particular need to engage on the economic level as well as take other steps on a security and strategic level. It's very clear that Modi wants to encourage much more Chinese investment in infrastructure and manufacturing. But at the same time, he wants to make clear to China ground rules in terms of China's growing presence within the region. The Chinese leader came with big promises in terms of investment, and in fact a lot of those promises were really rather overblown. There was talking of $100 billion, etc. But at the same time, precisely at the same time, during President Xi's visit, there were significant military incursions over the line of control between India and China in the Himalayas. Quite a large number of Chinese troops crossed over the line of control into Indian-administered territory. That action came quite as some surprise to those in Delhi and caused Modi and the Indian government react quite strongly. In the strategic and security area, increasingly clear that he wants to build relationships with a group of states within the region, which include the United States, Japan, Australia and Vietnam. They would be, I suppose, the key countries that are present within the region that he wants to build security relationships with.
How does China see the world, and What does it want the world to become? What's your strategy? What's your plan?
I think it's a very big question. I just want to put it in a simple way. I think, what do we Chinese want? The new leadership in China has made it very clear that we have a Chinese dream. What does it mean? When we are talking about the Chinese dream, the goal is very clear that we want our country to be modernized by 2050.
What we have to see in India is what was given when India became independent and what Indians added to it. Let's look at the givens of India. The first given is desperate poverty. For 150 years under colonial rule, believe it or not, India's economy grew at the rate of 0%. Secondly, the country was traumatized through partition. And third, immediately after partition, there was a war between Pakistan and India on the issue of Kashmir. So the challenge was to produce what I would call internal integration so that India could become a normal state with territory, a government, a population, and sovereignty, and feed its own people. That's the kind of challenge India is stuck with. What does India add to it? So let's go back to Nehru. He's all set to have the first general elections, and that general election produces a Congress party victory. The question then is, if people are giving you a mandate to rule, how do you translate that mandate into actual policy? The Congress party does two things, one about internal politics and one about external politics. The internal politics was about having a democratic form of government with commitments to socialism or social democracy. How the society can look after its less privileged, and the method for that was democratic planning. What to do about the rest of the world? There, the Congress party under Jawaharlal Nehru's leadership developed the policy of non-alignment, which is neither to be a camp follower of the Americans nor of the Soviets, but to have a third way.
How would you summarize India's challenges in the regional and global international politics?
For some time, going back to circa 1991, India has been much more aggressive in trying to look to its extended environment. Also, the desire to engage more effectively with Central Asia after the Soviet Union disintegrated and you had the Central Asian republics, but also looking west to countries like Iran and the Gulf, Israel, and then of course looking south. The Indians like to say that it's called the Indian Ocean for a reason. But what does make Pakistan different, of course, is that it has nuclear weapons. If you're Pakistan and you want to have some sort of territorial concession that's favorable to you, you confront a much larger adversary. You don't have diplomatic capabilities of solving it on your terms. You don't have political capabilities of solving it on your terms. So that really leaves a limited number of options. And Pakistan has been in the business of using non-state actors since 1947. As Pakistan's nuclear capabilities continue to develop, it was able to use these non-state actors with impunity. That makes the calculations much more complicated. India can't simply punish Pakistan militarily because there's always this fear of inadvertent or advertent nuclear escalation.
Externally, there is Pakistan, of course, and Pakistan, at least the Pakistani army, will continue to fight to get the whole of Kashmir and bleed India through cross-border terrorism.
The thing that I do applaud about the Modi government is that he is very interested in India projection of real power. And he has a different understanding of the Pakistan problem set. His predecessor was interested in having talks that were really going nowhere. And Modi understands that there's no point in having talks with Pakistan when Pakistan doesn't have really any interest in peace. I think what we're going to see from the Modi government is something that would be more expected of a rising international power. I think we're going to see his government developing military options that allow India to be more flexible in how it might respond to a Pakistani-based terrorist attack.
Even though we have in Mr. Modi a vision and sort of a business plan, I don't think in the medium term at least one can count on 100% success. So one should scale down expectations from Mr. Modi. I'll complete it by giving you a little image. You may Google it and you will find Mr. Modi on the banks of the Ganges River. It's a part of his national campaign to clean up India. So here is Mr. Modi digging with a shovel mud and a man ready with a basket to carry that mud. The Prime Minister as a cleaner. Now, we are talking about an age when in China, gigantic earth movers produce high-rise buildings just like that. And here is a Prime Minister using a technology at least 2,000 years old, where you dig earth and a man carries them on his head. How do we deconstruct this image? On the one hand, Mr. Modi is saying, like Gandhi, you don't need a government to tell you to wash your hands before you eat. You don't need a government to clean your own village clean. That's one kind of image. The other image is the government can do only so much. Without the full, free, voluntary, enthusiastic participation of society, no government can succeed. These are the kind of messages he's sending out. And a lot will depend on to what extent he is able to build up a movement which will carry civil society with the government to go towards the objectives that he has set up for India. I think I'll stop there.
Perfect.
to the